Welcome back to the Josh Calloway podcast. This is State Representative Josh Calloway, and I have some very special guests with me here on the podcast today, and a very interesting topic that we are going to discuss. But we have Miss Ashley Maddox that is here with us, and she is from Hardin County and has decided to come on the podcast and talk about something that her and I have been discussing over the last couple months, that maybe we can, through getting this out into the public sphere, get some ideas and maybe get some support to fix some issues that are going on in our system and in our state. And then we also have Miss Angela Calloway with us, and she's been on here several times, so everybody knows who she is, but she is my wife and pretty much the one that keeps me straight. I really feel a little bit different tonight because I don't think I have ever recorded a podcast without a Diet Dr. Pepper in my hand. Some of you have commented about that, but I am trying to do better. So I'm drinking water out of a plastic bottle. So I'm not really sure if that's any better or not, but I'm trying. So we've been out of the legislative session for a little while. We are working, getting ready to go into the interim committee session, and we will be working on legislation for the 2026 General Assembly. And this is something that I have had a lot of interest in, have been looking at. Part of the reason that I ran for office and part of my passion revolves around children. How do we protect children? How do we protect their minds? How do we protect their hearts? How do we protect them physically? In every way, what can we do to protect children? And we have entities inside of our state that are to help support making that happen, whether it be Child Protective Services, the Cabinet of Health and Family Services that they work under. We have entities that help with that, our law enforcement, local law enforcement, state police, that get involved in making sure that children are protected. Now, when that takes place, when we are talking about the subject of protecting children, we understand that there are two sides always to every story. And we also understand that the parent is the primary authority in a child's life. And there are parents that do things that causes them to have to relinquish that authority. There are bad parents out there that do not protect their children, that put them in environments that are not good for them, or they allow things to happen, or they are perpetrators themselves. And we have laws that take care of that. But we also have a system of government that we have had for centuries of due process, that every individual is to receive due process, and they are to have their speedy day in court, and to be able to argue their case as to what happened on both sides of this issue. And this is what I found about this issue. And, you know, I'm sure with what you've been through, you've probably read about all types of different situations that other people have dealt with comparing to your situation. This is what I have found. Anytime that a child is involved and there's some type of abuse that is alleged, everybody gets scared and squishy when it comes to that due process part, because they always want to err on the side to make sure that kids are protected. And I've seen a few situations in this state to where the system has been able to use that to their advantage and do things that are nefarious and wrong. We have had whistleblowers that have come out and talked about some things that have happened inside of Child Protective Services. We know that in the recent past, we've had kids sleeping on the floor at state offices, and a lot of things that are very concerning to me. And so I thought it would be good to let you just talk through your story a little bit, talk about what has happened and where we are at right now. And then maybe we can talk about some solutions as to how we can make sure that the system is transparent, that the system, that the entities inside of the system work together, and that parents' rights are always protected. I think that those are some key things. So, Miss Ashley, maybe talk a little bit about your situation. Go back to the beginning about what has happened and where we're at, how you got to where you are today.
So when I met my husband, before we were ever married, we had to call CPS and get them involved. There were some things told to us by one of the kids involved that were just absolutely crazy. It had to do with animal abuse. It had to do with domestic violence, drugs, all kinds of craziness. So what we ended up finding out was that there was a long history of domestic violence that before the kids were involved with these adults. That was nothing was ever done, except for the abuser. His kids were taken away from him. The mom usually wouldn't let them around their father because the situation was bad. I completely understand that. But when me and my husband had to call and report things that happened in front of kids, everything changed. So, I mean, I've been through court before, family court. I got sole custody of my oldest. So I was a little bit familiar.
Yeah.
But that was years ago. It was a completely different situation. So with this one, I mean, you hear the things all the time that, the courts are biased against dads and things like that. And, they're all for moms. But it was really weird that CPS done an investigation that there was a child that made allegations against his mom and her boyfriend, and they sent the child right back home in the same situation that he just talked about in court, that he had just talked about with CPS workers.
Was he removed at all during that time?
Not for many months after mom was not compliant with the court orders. And we had issues. One of the issues being that when this child came to my house, he had a cell phone all the time. And Grandma told me one time that she made sure that he always had a cell phone with a plan. We're talking about a kid in elementary school. In my house, my kids that are that little don't have cell phones. Mm. Not until you're old enough to work for it and buy one yourself, because you're not going to appreciate it. It's not something that I think a little kid needs, but each parent to their own. So she told me that she would make sure that he had this cell phone because sometimes moms got broke and she always wanted to be able to get a hold of him. I can understand that. But when he came to my house with the phone, one time we had issues. We had been at Beach Bend and we had to leave early because one of the kids that we were with, he was in foster care and he was having an asthma attack and just was, he couldn't stay. We had to come home early. And this other child was upset. They were fighting about it. And he ended up taking his cell phone into the bathroom. And I went to check on him because we're talking, he was like 8 years old. He would not let me have the password to his phone. He took his phone in there with him. And I'm wondering what's going on. You're 8 years old. Why are you taking the phone in the bathroom? Why are you being so secretive about it? And then why would you not give me the password so I could see what's going on? It's part of my job when you're in, when you're with me that I should be protecting you. What are you doing? So he wouldn't give us the password, nothing. So we put the phone up. Whenever it was time to give this child back to his mom, let her know of the situation. And then we got a call, I don't know, maybe later on that evening, the next day, and a child had taken pictures of their genitals. That's not normal behavior. This was also reported to CPS, and nothing ever came of it. But this child lied and said that the kid that had the asthma attack, that he was the one that took the pictures of himself. So I had to report this to the foster parents. There was a big to-do. This this foster child had to explain this stuff to his therapist, and he kept saying, it wasn't me. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I mean, I didn't know. And so we kept the kids away from each other. We wouldn't let that foster kid come back over, nothing. I wanted to keep my kids safe.
Right.
And then a few months later, he was like, no, it was me. Those were my pictures. And I'm like, why would you do that? He was like, well, we were wrestling, and I thought maybe I had a bruise there. Well, if it's that innocent, why didn't you tell your other parent? Why didn't you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, it didn't add up for me. So all of this was told to CPS, and I was told by the worker at the time that this is why this child needed to be in therapy. And I was like, you're absolutely right. So where's he going to therapy at? And he told us, and we went and checked on it ourselves, and this child had not been into therapy more than one appointment. And so I'm like, okay, we've been in this CPS court case since August. It's now December, and we're just now finding this out. And you, as a CPS worker, have been reporting to the courts, to both judges, that everything's going well, the family's cooperating, that this child's getting the services he needs, and he hasn't been seen.
So basically, red flag after red flag that you all were seeing and trying to bring to the attention.
And then I
of the
found
system.
out that this child was behind on immunizations. He had not been in for a well child checkup in over 2 years. He had 5 cavities. He wasn't doing the court-ordered stuff. And that the stories he was telling us pretty much told us that this parent was violating the EPO that was put in place to protect this child by having him around people that he wasn't supposed to be around because he knew too much. You know what I'm saying? And then I was just told, well, if you think that's happening, then call the state police. I'm not allowed to stalk the other parents on their parenting time and find out whether or not this child is in places he's not supposed to be or around people he's not supposed to be around. You are CPS. Isn't this your job? Aren't you supposed to protect these kids? Aren't you supposed to make sure that they are not around the people that they're not supposed to be around?
So you had shared custody at this time?
Yes.
Okay. And so there were certain restrictions or regulations in place.
Yes.
And they were, as far as you know, on that end, they were not being.
Absolutely.
Okay. They weren't being met. Okay.
And then we got pictures of one of the parents in another situation, a domestic violence situation. Gave that to CPS. Custody was taken away at that time, but they left the parenting time the same, 50-50. So the only thing it did was make the other parent responsible for co-pays and making sure that the court rules were being followed. Well, okay, as long as the kid's getting taken care of, okay. But then we ran into other problems. So this kid, every time that he would go with one parent, he would lie. He would make up things. He would say things that weren't going on and that weren't true. And I brought this to the attention of the social worker. And there was nothing done about it. That case ended up, it went on for 2 years. That parent hid a pregnancy with the man that she was claiming she wasn't around. She got pregnant by him. Then she hid the pregnancy and missed one of the court dates because she was in the hospital giving birth. And me and my husband eventually, we got tired. Whatever y'all want to do. Because it was like, it doesn't matter what we show the court, what we tell them's going on. It doesn't matter how much proof we have. The system's going to do what the system wants to do. And that was really discouraging because we kind of gave up there for a little while. Like, we can't change it. And so I kind of came to the conclusion that there's a child that's going to be at my house that will see 2 different families. And hopefully one day he will realize which kind of person he wants to be, where, what he wants to do in life type thing. And maybe that will influence him and, it won't be the way it is at the other parent's house. But there were multiple cases. There was more. In 2021, there was a 911 call made at the other parent's house. And this child was terrified. We went and picked him up. It wasn't our parenting time to have him, but we absolutely went to go pick him up. And it wasn't until we got there that we seen the other parent black and blue from head to toe. And, that person's out of my life. This is never going to happen again, blah, blah, blah. Same things we've always been told. And whenever we got in the car and we were driving away from that place, this child told me he had to call 911. So there's a record of it. That police officer that responded to that did not report this to CPS. That parent got an EPO against the person who abused them and then went to court and dropped it. There was no checks and balances there. My husband tried to get an EPO to keep his child away from this other parent who wasn't safe and kept exposing their child to domestic violence, and that was dropped. The judge said because we didn't bring the child to the courtroom and nobody told me that he had to be there, I figured he'd been through enough. We sent him to school that day. We had court later on. There was a social worker there. He had told all these things to the social worker. Why can't the social worker speak? That didn't make sense to me. Yeah. And why didn't you tell us that this is, And they said, well, it's considered hearsay. There's a report. What do you mean? Did
state police ever give an explanation as to why they
this
didn't
wasn't
report?
State police. This was
I'm
LaRue
talking about
County.
the actual instance where he called 911. Why did that not get reported by
that would be
CPS?
The LaRue County Sheriff's Department, and I can't answer that.
Okay.
So then there was another case that opened. This time daycare called, said, hey, kids are telling us that they're getting bruises from dad and that the situation's not good. They're fighting, blah, blah, blah. CPS comes in. They question mom. Mom says he doesn't live here anymore. That was always the MO. That's how things started. So they substantiate on the bad boyfriend. They give mom services. Oh, we're going to help you. Therapy. Let's do therapy. Let's do parenting classes. Let's do all these assessments. It never helped anything. It actually helped things to snowball into a worse problem because not everything does therapy cure. If you don't have a person who wants to change things and change behavior, then you're not going to have a situation that changes. You're just going to have kids that have now reported things that happened and are, social worker goes back and tells the parents, hey, this is what they've accused you of, and leave the kid there, and the social worker goes home, So, and then it came out that, well, one parent makes this child lie. That's what they reported to CPS. And then there was also another report. Well, the child said he had pulled out a loaded gun and pointed it at mom's boyfriend and threatened mom's boyfriend that if you hurt my mom again, I'm going to shoot you. And we explained to him that you would be in a lot of trouble. If you killed somebody, you would go to jail for murder. Even if you were a minor, even if you were trying to protect your parent, that's not your responsibility.
And CPS knew that instance.
Oh, there's a record of it. Yes, they documented that.
Okay,
and then they said that I think it didn't meet criteria because they couldn't come up with a timeline and they didn't have a report of a kid with a gun. What? Okay. The kid told you himself that he had done this, and you asked him if he felt safe to go back to the house, and he said yes.
And he was how old at the time?
I want to say 11 or 12.
So not a reputable source to make that kind of decision for him.
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
So then my mom had terminal cancer. She was diagnosed in April or May of 2022. She didn't make it very long. She passed away in November of 2022. It was absolutely awful. I spent every minute that I could with my mom.
Right.
I would take dinner to my parents. I helped my mom bathe. I shaved her head when she started chemo. It was awful. It was awful. Sure. And she passed away. And 2.5 months later, my daughter and my youngest son are playing in the living room while I'm doing dishes. And my daughter talks about what this family member done to her and is telling her brother what this family member done. And I just stopped and I was like, what did you say? And when she repeated it back to me, we waited until the kids got home from school. We questioned him, and he didn't even hide it. He didn't lie. I mean, at first he lied, but then he was like, I did it, and this is the reason why. He said he was addicted to porn. He said that he didn't know why he done it. Oh, this was the first time. And then it was, oh, well, I touched her one other time. And I was just like, this isn't making sense. I phoned CPS. I made another report. I went to KSP the next morning. I sat down with a detective, and it was Detective Cowan. He was awesome. Like he done his job, and let's just say he tried to do his job to the best of his ability. But when I called CPS, this did not meet criteria. They would not investigate, even though they already had a case open at the time. And I'm thinking, if there is a kid doing these things while CPS has already got an open case and he still feels comfortable enough to do this kind of stuff to a toddler, I mean, there's 10 years difference in him. So it's not that he didn't know the difference between right and wrong. It's none of that kind of stuff.
At that time, how long had CPS had active investigations going with this particular scenario? Because you've mentioned several cases.
So from October of 22, I believe it was, and I didn't find out this stuff until February of 23.
Okay. And so there had already been several scenarios that you had reported and had been okay too.
Yes.
Okay.
And they were about to close services. Oh, they were happy with the progress that the family was making.
Okay. And when you report something to CPS, that's just making a phone call?
Yes.
And then you are explaining something and they just document that you made
They document
a claim.
it, and then I guess from what I understand is they talk about it, whatever office or whatever it goes to, and decide whether or not it meets criteria to investigate or to send somebody out there. If it meets criteria, they send somebody. If it doesn't meet criteria, you may never hear about it again.
Okay, so you reported it and then you also went to the police.
Yes.
Okay.
And then it was the CPS, it didn't meet criteria, but the worker came out anyway. And she asked me what was going on, and I told her what I had been told by this child, what he confessed to, what my child had said. And she kept going, oh, well, we're going to get him services. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And it was always, he's going to be back in your home. And I wasn't comfortable with that because I'm like, how is that going to work? And if I have to have him back in my home and he does this again, whose fault is it? Where does the negligence lie there? Because we had so many issues that I don't want anything else to happen to my child. But that part of me that tried to advocate for the other child, that's not my responsibility no more.
Yeah.
My toddler cannot do things for herself. She does not have her own voice. She's priority. And I can't help you anymore. But I did get services set up at Rivendell because that is what the detective mentioned. But I was also under the impression that this was not an ongoing thing. I didn't know. Later on, I found out that my daughter was not the only victim. There was multiple victims. This wasn't a one-time thing.
Does CPS have reports of those instances?
What they choose to document, yes.
Okay. I just didn't know if it had been reported.
Yes.
Okay.
And was it prior to what happened or what was reported to you by your daughter? Were those
the other instances,
did they happen before or after what happened to your daughter?
I'm thinking that one of the girls, it was at the same time.
Yeah.
Depending on which household this kid was in. He was perping at both households. Another one of the victims, I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And as far as CPS, being made aware of the situation, your specific situation, had any of those other situations been reported to them up to that point?
Prior? No.
Okay.
No. Nope.
Gotcha.
As a matter of fact, I wouldn't know about those situations if I hadn't done a records request from the ombudsman and my husband did the same thing. Because that's that's how we found out that CPS had caught this parent on a recorded line coercing their child, telling them to lie to the police and say it was attempted rape so they would get less time. That they told them.
And there's records of that?
Yes.
Okay.
And one thing that CPS kept from me until right before the case closed, and I mean a few weeks before this case closed, because I randomly done another records request, and I said, I want anything I've never been given. I want to make sure that I have the full picture, because I have a lot of questions. And in those documents, it wasn't very many pages, but in there is a the child that perpetrated, when he had to tell his parent that he was perping on one of his toddler siblings at that home, that parent is documented as saying, the whole point of this is that it was only supposed to happen at Ashley's house, not my house. And that, it made me sick. I was crying. I was very emotional. But to find out that this parent knew, that's what it tells me.
Right.
This parent not only knew, but helped to hide it, and was pretty much like, hey, you're not supposed to talk about this part of it. But me being me, I want to know why this kid is doing this behavior, because this is not a normal behavior. This is not any way normal or okay.
Right.
Why is this kid doing this to other kids?
Right.
And this is part of a cycle.
Yeah.
Right. It is.
So in order to break it, you've got to know what the heck's going on.
Yeah. You have to figure it out.
What have
So-
they been exposed to?
Yes.
Has things happened to them that has
Yep.
put these things in their mind? You know, all of those things are vitally important to find out, to help somebody at that age that is having those types of struggles and committing those types of crimes. That's crimes. It's not just a struggle. I mean, they're committing a crime. And so
he was in therapy at this time, or supposed to be in therapy? Or was
Yes,
that, okay.
Yes, in a mental hospital type setting that dealt with perpetrators.
Okay. And did they help him? Did they come to any did they come up with any solutions or ideas?
So one of these parents, the one that I'm talking about, actually done this on this recorded line while this child was in therapy at this place.
Okay.
This child got to decide, along with this parent, not to include dad. Don't include dad in therapy. And then this parent also sent dad text messages and said, your child doesn't want you included in therapy because it's all confidential, and he doesn't want you reporting things to the court. And so to me, I'm like, I thought everything was reported. What do you mean? What else is going to be said that's not been reported?
right.
What, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
and what parent has the right to decide that the other parent doesn't get to know?
Right.
But CPS went along with it. My husband never got those records. Never. The state police never got those records to find out everything that had been confessed. What happened? You know, none of it. One of the CPS investigator actually, when it came to the third victim, she said she didn't know why this report wasn't accepted, that it must have gotten thrown in with the other girl that they were investigating. And I'm thinking to myself, are you serious? She didn't know she was being recorded, but are you really out here telling parents that, and that it's good for that child not to have this?
So basically what they were saying is it will make it easier on him legally.
Yes.
By putting these together, and
Yes.
and that's
And in this,
what they were advocating
yes,
for.
and in this same conversation, my dad was present, and he asked the social worker, he said, what did you mean the last time that you were here and you said that my daughter was pushing for an EPO, talking about me, because I pushed for an EPO. I don't know that the judge was or wasn't going to grant it, but when I had to plead my case, why I deserved this EPO for my children, I had to call my husband to testify, and he had to testify, and it was extremely hard for him to talk testify against his child.
Yeah.
For his other child, you know. And that put him in the middle, and I hated that. But at the same time, like, my daughter was a toddler, and it no different than any other kid, but she was too little to know the difference between right and wrong. A teenager does.
Right. And the other part of it too is that part of what we are supposed to be doing inside of the system is to rehabilitate people and to help people. And sometimes the only way you can do that is by holding them accountable for what they have done. And so that is what the system is supposed to be there for. And what I find is a lot of times, whether it be in the adult system or inside of a juvenile system, we basically turn it into a revolving door. We bring people in, we put them back out the same way they came in, and we continually do that. And that is part of the reason why that recidivism rates are the way that they are, and people are more likely to offend. With that being said, somebody to commit those types of crimes at that age is extremely broken. Like there is a deep broken part of them that has to be addressed and has to be, somebody has to get engaged and involved. And, I'm always one to say that the government's the last person I want trying to fix any problem because they mess up more than they fix. But our system as a whole should be supportive of making sure that other kids are protected and justice is served, due process is had, and that the person gets the best rehabilitation they can possibly get.
I was the only parent to press charges or hold this child accountable.
Yeah.
And that was, he's confessed to at least 19 counts of sexual abuse on at least 3 kids.
Yeah.
And the other kids, they are with the same family that kept all of this quiet and that coerced him to begin with.
So when you pressed charges against him, did that remove him from your home?
Well, CPS had already removed him.
Okay.
He went into a forensic interview and he blamed me and Dad for everything. And then I don't know exactly when because the worker would not tell me. But according to the investigator on this case, the CPS investigator, he recanted his allegations and said that he was scared. That's why he lied, and that he didn't want to get in trouble. And by then, my husband was already under pressure to stipulate, which is not okay. He was actually told by his attorney at the time that if you don't stipulate, then they will file criminal charges on you.
So talk about the criminal charges that you were looking at as a result of those allegations.
So just a minute. So the young boy, he made allegations against you and his dad.
That we did not provide a good environment, that we wouldn't take him to therapy, that, things like that, of that nature. And that's why he done this.
He had no proof for any of those things.
No.
Okay. And so when you say that they pressured your husband to substantiate, explain exactly what that means.
So once a child makes those allegations, and he was removed from both of his parents. At that time, he was in the sole custody of his dad, and they didn't live at my house. They had to live with another family member. When you're brought into court,
and this is family court.
Yes.
Okay.
He was given this piece of paper, and it was explained to him that if he stipulates that you are not admitting guilt or innocence, but that pretty much you're agreeing to work with the courts, and that you do this so that you don't get charged criminally.
Okay.
So he's basically just probably given steps or specific things that he has to do to ensure that he's going to be a good parent going forward, or whatever the case may be.
They give you a case plan with all these case tasks on it that you're supposed to do.
Right.
And so both of you were charged with the same thing.
Yes, and
Okay.
mom too.
Okay.
All of us. Yes.
And was your husband the only one that?
Mom stipulated as well.
Okay.
I was not part of that proceeding. So the cabinet, when they get any kind of report, allegations, whatever, they don't have to have, it could be hearsay. They don't have to have any proof whatsoever at all. And the cabinet is in full control of any registry, full control. But in this case, I just got a letter in the mail that said that CPS had substantiated on me, and this is why, and that I could be put on a registry, and that I had 30 days to appeal.
And
that was as the result of what?
What he said.
Yes, the
what he
allegation.
accused you and your husband of.
Yes.
Which there wasn't any proof. They didn't come up with and say, we have this actual documentation, we have this video, we have this, and so therefore we feel justified in what we're saying to you.
Yes.
And when you say registry, you're saying that
child
they
abuse
were telling
or
you
child sex abuse
child
registry.
sex abuse registry.
Yes.
So your husband's name is on that.
I'm assuming so.
It has been on that name. They told him that's what it was going to be on.
Yes, that's what that paperwork says.
And so that would affect employment?
That would affect if he wants to go like with his
Does that affect his relationship with his other children and things he can do with them?
No.
Okay.
So apparently, and I don't know how this works completely, but in the state of Kentucky, if you're a perpetrator and you have kids, you're safe to be around your own kids until they say something. And then if they say something, well, then you're not safe to be around them, and there'll be an investigation. But he didn't. It wasn't that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the actual perpetrator will not be on any kind of child sex abuse registry, but the parent who made a police report with me, who reported this stuff to CPS, who've reported multiple times and had to call multiple times, that parent's going to be on this registry, along with the parent that hid the fact that their child was sexually abused by their family.
Yeah.
So.
And
so
you appealed.
You appealed. So
I did. And then once you stipulate, you cannot bring forth any evidence, even if it supports what you're saying.
So once you stipulate, it's done.
Yeah, we didn't know that. He didn't know that either.
Okay.
And he didn't understand that if you're in family court, they're not going to bring criminal charges. It's family court.
Right.
So we didn't know that either. By that time, I'd already submitted an EPO and it got approved. And in that EPO, I put in there that family court had not helped us, and neither had CPS. And when I went to court and I had to speak in front of the family court judge, I told him, I've already reported this to CPS. They said it didn't meet criteria. They won't do anything. Every time that we call them, it's the same scenario. And then, let's do some therapy. Let's do some of these classes. And then the same.
And then they want to turn around and
blame the parents whenever the same.
Charge you for based on what he was saying.
Yes.
And what type of due process was in that? Did they
None.
come and do an investigation? Did they give you the opportunity to present evidence? How did that work?
Once you stipulate, you're not allowed to present any evidence.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to do anything except for follow whatever the system says. And as far as me, I wasn't even brought to court. I just had a piece of paper mailed to me that said I was going to be on a registry if I didn't appeal. And I had to hire an attorney. It was $6,000. Like anybody, normal people don't have that. Yeah. Most people are one paycheck away from being absolutely broke.
Right.
Right.
And how did that appeal process turn out?
So I found out in November. Well, I didn't find out in November. It was actually December. But in November, this investigator actually wrote a letter that said she found no maltreatment by me and I wouldn't be on any registry, and that everything was changed to unsubstantiated.
But they didn't relay that information to you.
No, I had to find out from the ombudsman. They sent me a letter.
Yeah.
And I asked them why I didn't get it, and I don't know. That's my secretary. I guess my secretary didn't send it out. That's what CPS said.
Yeah.
So who oversees CPS?
The Cabinet of Health and Family Services.
The governor.
Okay.
And ultimately the governor.
Okay. Because it seems like there's a lot of unanswered.
There's no checks and balances.
Well,
There's unanswered questions. Mm-hmm. There's not there. There's certain documentation, and it seems that if they don't want to act on that, they don't really have to.
Well, I would tell you this. This is probably, you're probably the fifth or sixth parent that has reached out to me about a situation somewhat similar to this, or
in the same county.
Not in the same county. I've had a couple parents that know that I advocate for kids from Northern Kentucky that reached out to me, Hardin County, and a Breckenridge County. And there's also another situation that I've been engaged in and involved in of a particular, I won't go into all of it, but allegations were made against someone that was trying to help kids, and CPS got involved. Evidence was made up. They have proof of the made up evidence. They have tried to break them in the court system through attorney fees. They will not give them their day in court. And so there's no due process at all. And there is a major problem going on inside of the CPS system. Yeah. There are incentives, and they are incentivized to promote bad behavior because that is where their funding comes from.
Yep.
The more kids that they can get into foster care, the more kids that they can get into a home other than the parent, they are incentivized to do that because a lot of funding comes through that avenue. And then you think about this, what's going on in Colorado, and we've never discussed politics. I'm not going to have that discussion with you here. It's not relevant. But when you look at Colorado, that is pushing a law right now that if you do not, if you misgender your own child, that Child Protective Services can actually come in and remove the child from your home. And I've had people tell me recently, that's Colorado. We don't have to worry. That's not going on here. Focus on situations that are going on here. But at the very top of the executive branch and through this cabinet, we are missing checks and balances that could usher in those types of things to happen. And I assure you they are happening. It's happening through different methods where there's coercion going on. There are things that are taking place, and they are utilizing the system against parents. And then they are actually attacking sometimes the good parent because of them doing what they need to be doing. And so it is a major problem all across America, the incentive structure to cause kids to be pulled out of situations and create chaos. The money that follows that chaos is what funds a lot of what is taking place in the system, and they don't want to mess it up. I don't care to say it. I've said it in public. I'm saying it again. It is a broken, nefarious, and in some situations, it is a corrupt system that has to be fixed.
But what I just don't understand with CPS in this, for instance, you reported everything that you ever heard and knew immediately.
Yes.
There's record of that.
Yes.
And you did not, you tried to accommodate and follow whatever they told you to do. You contacted, you reached out, you went to the police, you did all these things. And then they don't have to account for anything that they've done.
No.
And then it's turned around and your husband has this record or he's on this registry. And that seems like a lot of dangerous power.
He never had a CPS case against him ever before this.
And so who decided that? That's all within that cabinet?
Supervisors.
Yeah, that's too
One
much.
Of them's here.
Yeah.
That's too much power.
Yes.
And you're messing with people's kids.
Yes, their whole family. And now he pays child support to one of the maternal family members that has custody that did not report any of the abuse that she knew about to this child.
And he's on the registry. See, that seems kind of skewed. And why can't anybody?
Because once you stipulate, you give up all those rights, but they don't tell you that first.
And the other piece of it is the way that the family court system works. It is different than our other court systems. And there's also, not every county even has family court. And so they're relying on people there to try to sift through these cases with them. They're all overloaded. All these family court judges will tell you that they're overloaded. They cannot keep up with everything that is going on.
Is there an actual judge in family court, or are they?
There
Yes.
is.
Okay.
There is.
And the judge makes the final decision, even in where if for instance, Breckenridge County does not have family court, but a judge will make the final decision before it's all said and done. After the individual that arbitrates takes all the evidence, they make a recommendation to the judge, and then the judge makes the final decision, sometimes having never personally been engaged or involved in the case. This is one thing that I will say that I think is great and that it is going to help in the future is you've documented everything.
Yes, I have, as much as I could.
You've got a lot of things.
I've got pictures, 911 calls, case files, emails between KSP and CPS, all kind of therapy records for the child that I never got therapy for.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem is there were multiple cases with this one child.
Yes.
Multiple records, all these things. And it seems like there's several people internally that have no idea what's going on, nor do they care to know. There's not somebody that's trying to put all this together and work out a plan. It's, well, he said you can do this and you can't do this. And here we are. And nothing, I mean, do you feel satisfied with what was resolved for your situation?
Absolutely not. I'm angry.
Yeah.
I want accountability and I want justice. After I was accused of any kind of child sex abuse at all, and the other parent sent me a text message and confessed to me that yes, she knew that her child was sexually abused by two of her family members before I ever even met these people, before I ever knew them, and that she never reported it because she didn't know what to do. But yet, I gave this to CPS.
Yeah.
They looked the other way. They chose to look the other way. And that's another thing that I have on tape as well.
Yeah.
The ongoing worker says, well, my boss told me not to do anything with this.
Yeah.
And I said, well, don't you have a duty to tell the court, to tell the judge?
That's exactly right.
And shouldn't you, from what I've read of the CPS manual, whenever they get a report of child sex abuse, it automatically gets sent to law enforcement. And law enforcement should investigate that.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, CPS would not cooperate with law enforcement. They would not give them the notes. Law enforcement did not.
And they asked for the notes?
Yes.
And they would not give them?
You have the open records on some of that.
Yes. And not only did they not give them, but the investigator says, well, why can't we give them? Did the supervisor say? And they were like, nope, we were just told no. She said, well, when did that change? We used to be able to give them to them.
Yeah.
The law enforcement, but nobody else. Because how on earth would you be able to stop this kind of abuse if you're not going to cooperate?
Right.
And if you have reports of other children being abused, you should probably give those to law enforcement.
Yes.
But here in the state of Kentucky, the other two children that I know of that were reported, no charges came for them. They did not get any justice. And they're little.
Yeah.
Maybe kindergarten. And the other one is, I want to say, maybe middle school. Maybe. I don't really know how old she is.
Yeah.
But they didn't get any justice.
I was going to ask you that question. What does accountability and justice look like to you? I'm sure you've thought through some of this, some things that either could be made right or at least be made clear.
I think that other parent that withheld all of this from the very beginning, from the first court case, that they should have to answer for those actions. And then to find out that parent was living with her mother, and that, how do they not know?
Yeah.
You substantiated on me with less. Now I know that there's therapy records where you've admitted this. I know that you've admitted this to caseworkers, and you've sent me text messages.
Yeah.
And your son has also admitted this. So there is a trail.
Yes.
That KSP cannot get a hold of, other than me giving those text messages. But here's the other thing I ran into. So when I talked to the detective, and I'm like, how is this okay? How do they substantiate on me? But then we find this out, and they're not even gonna bring charges. They're not gonna do anything. Are you kidding me? And what I was told by one of the sergeants is that somebody higher up in KSP Post 4 had decided that, quote, they wanted to have a good relationship with CPS, so they weren't going to pursue anything. How does that protect any kids?
Exactly right.
How does that stop this cycle?
Yeah, it's a societal problem. I mean, just going back, and again, every parent gets to decide how they want to raise their kid. But when you have kids that are exposed to things at a young age, whether it be via media, social media, all those things, all of those things are in our society to grab, and it is catered toward the minds of kids. And you put that into an environment to where a child is also in a bad environment, and that is their go-to, and there's no end to it. And that's why it is important that our system works. That's why it is important that we make sure that we hold them accountable, and there's checks and balances, and every single child that we can protect needs to be protected.
I have one more.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No.
So I know that you said there was multiple issues, long term. There was domestic violence. There was different things. And so if CPS had been made aware of stuff or earlier on and things had been done, would that have made things different for the outcome of your daughter? Was anything reported or they knew about beforehand?
So the domestic violence issues, I don't think that would have changed anything.
Okay.
Because unless I'm wrong, to my understanding, that this child had already been abused by his family members before the boyfriend came in the picture. But I could be wrong, because I've got a lot of questions about some of that, because some of the timelines don't add up.
Yeah.
From what's being told. I don't believe it. 100%.
I just would hate to know that you had documentation and all these things and could pinpoint and say, if this had right here, because we don't want what happened to your daughter to happen to anybody. And
Yes.
and even though she's young, there's so much trauma.
Oh yes.
With that. And I'm sure you're dealing with that.
A lot.
And knowing how to, there isn't a manual as a mom to know how to navigate a circumstance that should have never happened.
No.
You see what I'm saying? And so I'm sure you've had a lot of grief, and you don't know how to help her. She probably doesn't know how to express sometimes what.
No, because she's so little.
You see, yes. And
it
so
happened before she had all of her words.
Yeah.
Before she completely could,
And that's so serious.
It is.
And so damaging.
Yes.
And so I just, that's why if you could
there was previous domestic violence with one of these people reported with his kids before he ever came in contact with his family, though. And as a matter of fact, it says in the report that he was caught crawling through a neighbor's yard with a hatchet. And I guess he had called his oldest son, and he was threatening that he was going to come and kill his son and his ex-mother-in-law. So I'm thinking to myself,
This is the thing that I was thinking as she was talking about that, when you're looking, could we pinpoint a sign or something that should have or could have been reported? But this is the thing that when there's that much chaos going on in an environment where the kid is not getting the attention.
No. I would say during the very
you're going to
first
miss
case,
things. You're going to miss
Yes.
things that you should have caught. You could have caught because you're involved in this, whatever the case may be. And I don't know them, so I'm not throwing off anything on them. I'm just saying that you may not have been able to say, if we had reported this, that this would have stopped this, but you can look at the situation and say that if you were sidetracked with all the drama and trauma that you're dealing with in your life, whoever the parent was, you're definitely not giving them the attention to be able to recognize, because as parents, like, we pick up on stuff when
Yes.
something's just not right.
Yes.
They're off, their attitude's not right. They won't give you the pass code to the phone.
So that's the very
Those
first
types of
CPS
things.
case.
You see what I'm saying?
And CPS are trained to recognize these things. And how did you not recognize that this was abnormal behavior and didn't, just try to tell me, well, this is why they should be in therapy.
Yeah.
Were they in therapy yet? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And then we had to go through that whole thing and to find out that not only is CPS not capable and negligent, but they don't have the staff. They're overloaded with cases. They don't have the staff to do the things that they should be doing. They can't babysit parents.
Right.
Yeah.
Only the ones that are stupid enough to keep getting caught are the ones that, they end up,
Right.
something ends up happening eventually. But, these people, they got 2 little kids back in their home right now. And it makes me so angry because they're so little, they don't have a voice.
Yeah.
They can't tell what's going on. And now that all this has happened and one of the kids was taken away because of their behavior and stuff, I'm sure they use that. Well, you'll be taken away because that's what they told the other one.
Yeah.
If you tell, you're going to be taken away.
Right.
And that's reported to CPS.
Yeah.
And if CPS could have done anything, if the judges would have done anything, maybe this child would have turned out differently. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe this wouldn't have happened to my daughter if something had been done, if they had, paid more attention.
Yeah.
Listened to us instead of just documenting it and giving it to a judge.
Right.
And then making recommendations that didn't help anything.
Because the goal is for that to never happen to anyone's child.
Yeah.
What happened to your daughter.
Yeah.
And some things, you learn to cope and, but it just
But
takes,
it never goes away.
It takes away something. And it's such a serious thing. And, for a group, an organization, an entity there's seemingly no accountability in this case. No. You have a lot of questions and apparently nobody's going to answer them.
No, because it violates somebody else's HIPAA. It violates somebody else's privacy or whatever else. And I'm over here maybe if I could have some of these puzzle pieces, maybe I could help my daughter more.
Yeah.
She's got a lot of trauma. At the very beginning, I remember her telling me that her bed gives her nightmares. 4 years old, she's telling me her bed gives her nightmares. We got rid of that bed. And we let her pick out another one and switched bedrooms because maybe it gave her, she was in the little office next to me. And she still wasn't sleeping in her bed. She'd come get in my bed. And as much as I wanted her to be in her own bed and all these things, I can't tell my kid no. If that's the only place that you feel safe, you're coming to my bed.
Yeah.
I don't care what anybody says or what they think. If this is the only place that you can feel enough rest and just safe to go to sleep, okay.
Yeah.
And taking care of my mom and doing all the things that I did. I have a lot of grief over that because I'm like, why didn't I see more? You know what I'm saying? But everybody was busy. I also take care of my elderly grandmother. And I used to take care of my mentally handicapped uncle. He passed away of leukemia in 2021. And then my grandmother fell and got hurt in 2021, and she was not able to walk. She's a fall risk. She's still of sound mind and everything. But there was a lot that I had to do. My dad couldn't do everything that my mom needed. And there was that part that I had to pick up.
Right.
And I feel like I'm not ever going to be satisfied. I don't even know, after the system just let CPS get away with everything and just completely making my life and my husband's and my kids. I don't know that there is any kind of justice anymore.
Yeah.
But when you find out that when in family court, you don't have any protections like this, and you may get them and you may not. I mean, there's rules, but if CPS doesn't follow them, there's not an attorney out here that's going to, make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do, because then it affects their other clients. And that's what I was told. I said, if they violated my constitutional rights, I want to sue, because they did it purposefully.
Yeah.
And then later, when I reported more stuff, they retaliated by keeping the child away from my husband.
Yeah.
So why can't I do something? If somebody made false allegations about me and told CPS it was false afterwards, why can't I do something about that?
Right.
And the attorney told me that it could hurt his other clients that he had in family court, and that he wasn't going to take on anything like that, which I understand, but where does that leave me?
Right.
And I don't have a lot of money. I can't just go out here and get a lawyer.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many attorneys I've talked to, and they've all told me that they don't want to go up against CPS. Yeah. And then I found out that there was this court case that was in northern Kentucky from a few years ago, where an attorney actually went up against CPS, brought a case, and then they brought a case against his child and took his child away from him.
Yeah.
And they have way too much power with not enough checks and balances. I have reached out to Andy Bashir's office. I was told to write this lady who handles issues with the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, to write her an email in detail, which I did, and that was a few months ago. She has not wrote me back. I have reached out to my county attorney's office. I have told them the things that I've seen going on, and they pretty much put all the blame on KSP and say, well, if they don't bring us a case and they don't come to us, then we can't do anything. And then I talked to KSP, and they say, well, we reached out to the county attorney's office. They said they're willing to review this again, but then that's where it stopped.
Yeah.
So it's always somebody either not wanting to do the work, not wanting to go back, or, well, if we do this, then it could be negligence against the state and you would have a case.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I've found in a couple of situations that I've dealt with, is that they don't want that negligence. They look for a way to make you give so that you can't come back and sue them, even if they just push it off, to the point of them even saying, oh, we'll totally drop charges completely for a little minor infraction that you admit to. I'm talking about egregious charges, knowing they're not true.
I believe it.
Egregious charges, and we'll drop them just to cover themselves. And so this is what we have to have. We have to have accountability. We need to make sure that they get exposed, and we need somebody at the top that is willing to look at it and to clean house, get the corruption out, and appoint people that's going to ensure that parents' rights are protected and that kids are protected.
And that's the goal.
That's the hard part. My husband had a court-appointed attorney, and I'm not going to say his name, but he quit working in Hardin County. And I told my attorney, I said, hey, we've tried to get a hold of him several times. My husband wants these motions done. He wants to find out what's going on, blah, blah, blah. My attorney said, okay, watch this. We were sitting in his conference room, and he calls the other attorney. It goes to voicemail just like it does for us all the time. And he says, well, he'll get back to me. It wasn't even 5 minutes later. My husband's attorney called my attorney, sat there and spilled the beans that broke the confidentiality between the client-attorney privilege there. But then he looked at me and he said, if you ever tell anybody, I won't admit to it.
Yeah.
So everything is decided by the time you go in there. Everything's already decided behind closed doors. They decide, what they want to do. There's me and this other parent that coerced their child, everything. And they have on my profile from CPS that my anger is disproportionate for the situation, that I failed to meet the needs of the child, all this stuff. But the other parent is appropriate. They have an attachment and a bond. What, a trauma bond at this point?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's crazy.
Broken system.
That is way more than broken.
And corrupt.
Yes.
Broken and corrupt.
And so I wrote the family court judge a letter, and at the end I told him, I was like, I can't tell who the good guys and the bad guys are anymore, because if you're willing to just let this stuff go on, and it's my understanding that a judge is supposed to be there. They do have the final say, but they make sure that both sides are playing the way they're supposed to. So if you have, like, my husband's attorney left and wasn't working in the county anymore, and they just had a fill-in attorney come in.
Yeah.
So he didn't they didn't even have his records. They didn't know what was going on for the case. None of that stuff.
Right.
And I mean, there's a lot of people, and I didn't know until I got into the situation. There is a Facebook group. There is a petition online right now to remove one of the judges. And I want to say it was like at 1,400 signatures out of 2,500. And I had no idea about any of this and none of this until I was in the situation.
Yeah.
Because everything is sealed. You're not allowed to talk about it. You can get in trouble if you talk about it outside of court or without the community partners or CPS. And some of the things that, I've been told, it's disgusting.
Yeah. And if you do speak out, a lot of times there's retaliation.
Yes.
As what's been reported to me.
Yes.
So
it was almost 3 months that my husband didn't get to talk to his son, and the worker wouldn't answer, wouldn't text message back or nothing. And then she blamed my husband. Well, it's your responsibility. You knew where he was, you knew what person he was with. You should have reached out to him at your job. And he was like, that's not even an appropriate place to discuss this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And when he said that, and she just kept saying, well, you should have done something. Then she changed course and she apologized. She said, well, I was busy and I went on vacation and I had this and that going on. And when we talked to her in person, I looked at her and I said, how long does it take to text somebody back and say that, to give them an answer?
Right.
I said, so explain to me why that violated his parental rights during this process.
Yeah.
And there was no allegation new against him. There was absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
But you kept that parent away, and the parent that kept, doing all the things, that parent never lost access.
Yeah.
Kept doing therapy, was completely 100% in every single bit of it. And you're going to tell me that this is all legal? This is the way it's supposed to be? Like, it stinks.
Yeah.
A lot.
Well, it's very brave of you to be willing to speak out about it, and I'm sure that probably gives you some concern. And
absolutely,
when you talk about kids, I mean, it's a very delicate thing. There's reasons why that our system doesn't release names and information of minor victims.
And I understand that.
All of those things it's a delicate situation.
It is.
But every child deserves to be protected.
And these kids can't make these decisions for themselves.
Somebody has to speak up for them.
But this system is letting kids that do really awful things make decisions for themselves and putting them back in situations like, I know if you got charged with some kind of crime with drugs, they would not say it's okay for you to go back into a home with drugs.
Yes.
But in this situation, they put this perpetrator child back with a family member that never once reported any of the abuse, and they were with CASA.
Yeah.
Those are the court advocates.
Yes.
And how is this okay?
Yeah.
Why would this be the only place that you could think of to take this child?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a corrupt, broken system that needs accountability. It's one of the reasons I want you on here, because I am trying to compile information and make sure that we can put out into the public what has taken place and hold these people accountable. And at the end of the day, whether someone is right or wrong does not negate their due process that they should get.
Yes, they should.
It doesn't negate that. I have been involved in situations that some people were afraid to get engaged and involved in because what if this person did something they shouldn't have done? That doesn't negate their due process. They deserve due process. Our Constitution, it secures that for us, and we cannot let a system take that away from us, or they have all power. Who will they come after next? Whose kids will they, what person will they retaliate against next? And so I think you have to hit it just like you have. You hit it head on with force. You continue to expose it. You continue to speak out until you get somebody's ear that will listen, that maybe has the ability. I can't fix it all, but I do know that the more collective voices that we get speaking out, the more that we have the ability to expose what's going on.
Yep.
And you have put out a lot of questions, so hopefully we can get some of those answered.
Yeah.
I don't know that they even will. And by me talking, I could be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
I could be in more trouble than somebody who's committed over 20 rapes.
Yeah.
So, in that person, even though that person's already told people what they done and bragged about it while they were in treatment,
Yeah.
and it got back to me by another parent, I could still be held liable. And while there's no accountability there, just a slap on the hand, what is this child going to do as an adult?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, there has to be accountability all around. Well, thank you for being willing to come out and to speak with us and to be able to get your story out there. And we want people to listen. We want them to hear. If you have similar situations that you have dealt with, reach out to us, and we'll be more than glad to look into it, to get people looking into it and make sure that we produce as much accountability as we can. Well, thank you, and God bless.
I appreciate it. Thank you.